Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sprint 245 review. This is a normal 2-week sprint, and let's get started. I'll start with the overview, Gilbert on the UI, Adam on providers, and Joe on the platform. There was a lot of PRs merged this sprint, 123. Some of this is more Rails 7 PRs that were opened in the previous sprint but never made it, so we closed them in this current sprint with 16 enhancements and 21 bugs fixed also. And over to Gilbert on the UI.
Thanks, Jason. Not too much on the UI side in this sprint. The first was a bug fix. We dropped include concern in resource pool helpers. Then we had the resource pool UI cloud manager enhancement that was reverted for that merge this sprint. And that's it for the UI.
All right. So for providers, Amazon had some new instance types this sprint as well. For Azure, we fixed a bug with the cloud subnet API version, causing a newer property to be left out, which is where the address prefix was moved to for newer cloud subnets. This was causing the refresh to fail, and also during provisioning, some of the network-related API calls were failing. So we bumped the API version to the latest, and that resolved the issue. For embedded Terraform, we fixed the Terraform runner available method. The API path that was using was not correct, so it was always returning false, even though it was available. Next slide. For workflows this sprint, we added an event-driven workflows runner, which lets us much more rapidly respond to Docker and Kubernetes containers exiting and the state becoming ready. Previously, we essentially had a 10-second poll that we would loop to check if it was ready, but obviously it's a lot more efficient to use events to do that, so we added that this sprint. So hopefully you'll see, particularly you see this a lot with the dialogue, dynamic dialogues that are backed by workflows. You should see them exit much more quickly. For workflow instances, we created a manager ref UUID, which we set to the flow execution ID, which should make it easier to correlate which flow execution workflows map to which workflow instance records. And then we ended up using that as part of the event catcher to be able to look up from events which workflow instance they're for. For flow, we added a more granular compare key to determine the path at initialization time for the choice states. Keenan implemented is numeric false, and also add support for choice states that don't have a default state. And we added labels for containers with the workflow execution ID so that we can tell more easily which container applies to which workflow. And that's it for providers. Over to Joe.
Okay, for platform enhancements, Brandon enhanced the Podified setup to prefer routes, if available, over the Kubernetes ingress. Jason and Keenan updated Podified and appliances to use Graham SHA 256 password encryption in Postgres. Jason updated the dummy application we have in the schema repo to use Rails 7. In gems pending, Jason dropped CI testing of Rails 6.1 and added 7.1 and 7.2. The bot extracted the latest English strings for translations, and Keenan refactored out a class variable unsupported. Next slide. For platform bugs, Jason cleaned up the capitalization of a migration class name. Adam fixed the linking of a MIQ worker row to a running pod when it was not created via run single worker. Brandon fixed a bug preventing SSHing into GCE appliances. He fixed this by adding the missing Google Guest Agent package for GCE. Jason updated RexML and gems pending for a CVE fix. And Brandon had a few different fixes. He reverted an OpenSSL change that was locking down the version. We were doing that to avoid a version that was causing segmentations faults, so hopefully that will be no longer occurring once we upgrade. And he also allowed timestamp release builds and RPM builds. And finally, Brandon fixed a few bugs in RPM build to get the rsyslog working again. Next slide.
And that's all for our Sprint 245 review. Our next Sprint review 246 is on September 18th at the usual place and time. And I'd like to thank all the presenters today, all the contributors, and everybody having discussions in our community. Thanks, everyone.